From the deep blue seas to the tempestuous oceans, these creatures have captivated imaginations for centuries. Let's dive into the tales of 7 of the most powerful and enigmatic sea monsters from Greek mythology. 7. Scylla and Charybdis. So, in Greek myths, there were these 2 horrible sea creatures, Scylla and Charybdis, that made life really tough for sailors. They lived in the Strait of Messina, which is this super narrow waterway, and they were like the ultimate bad news for anyone trying to get through. Scylla used to be this pretty lady but got turned into a monster. Think of her as having a bunch of feet, 6 heads with snake necks and lots of sharp teeth. She also had dog heads around her waist. She lived in a cave and would grab sailors from passing ships. This change was because of some magic and jealousy stuff involving Poseidon, the sea god, or Cersei, a sorceress. Scylla's story is all about unexpected dangers. In the Odyssey, a famous Greek story, the hero Odysseus had to sail near her and lost some of his crew, choosing that over facing Charybdis. Now, Charybdis was like a giant whirlpool. Some stories say she was the daughter of the sea and earth gods, or maybe Poseidon and earth. 3 times a day she'd gulp down a bunch of water, creating this huge pull that could sink ships. She's a reminder of how the sea can be really unpredictable and dangerous. In the Odyssey, Odysseus barely got away from her by hanging onto a tree. 6. Sirens. The sirens are famous in Greek myths for their beautiful but deadly singing. At first, no one was sure what they looked like, but later they were shown as half woman, half bird. Over time, they became seen as more beautiful and less horrible. Their song was magical and dangerous, leading many sailors to crash. Originally, sirens could be men or women, but later on, it was just the women. They got some of their look from Egyptian myths and were often shown playing instruments like the lyre. They were daughters of a river god and offered knowledge and wisdom through their songs. They knew everything about a big war, the Trojan War, and promised to share this with anyone who listened. They're unique in Greek myths because they messed with people's minds more than their bodies. In the Odyssey, the hero Odysseus wanted to hear them but didn't want to crash, so he had his crew block their ears and tied himself up so he could listen without getting in trouble. 5. Cetus. In ancient Greek tales, there was this massive sea creature named Cetus. The sea god Poseidon got really upset with Ethiopia's queen, Cassiopeia. She boasted that she and her daughter Andromeda were more beautiful than the sea nymphs. Angered by this, Poseidon sent Cetus to terrorize Ethiopia. To calm the beast, they decided to offer Andromeda as a sacrifice to it. Around the same time, the hero Perseus was on his way back from defeating Medusa, another terrifying creature. When he saw Andromeda, he immediately fell for her. Medusa's head, which Perseus had with him, could turn anyone who looked at it into stone. So Perseus used it to rescue Andromeda, turning Cetus to stone. In some versions of the story, he defeats Cetus with his sword instead. Interestingly, Cetus is also the name of a star constellation. It's shaped like a whale and is pretty huge, best seen in the autumn and early winter months. The constellation and the story remind us how the ancient Greeks linked their myths to the natural world and the stars above. 4. Triton. Triton is a cool character from Greek mythology. He's the son of Poseidon and Amphitrite and lives in a fancy golden palace under the sea. Unlike some sea gods who were mean, Triton was actually quite nice. He's famous for his conch shell trumpet, which he used to either calm down or stir up the waves. Triton's look is a mix of human and fish features, making him a merman. But artists have portrayed him differently over time. Sometimes he's got a snake-like or double dolphin tail, and other times he's shown with crab claws or horse-like legs on his fishtail. His skin is usually a deep blue or cerulean color, with green hair, adding to his ocean vibe. In stories and myths, Triton pops up here and there. He's hung out with other mythical folks like Heracles and Nereus, showing he's a pretty big deal in Greek myths. There's this one story where he helps the Argonauts on their quest for the Golden Fleece, showing off his sea smarts and helpful nature. Another tale is about his face-off with Mycenaeus, son of Aeolus, which shows Triton's strength. Triton was also a big deal in ancient Libya as the god of Lake Tritonus. Some Greek art from the 6th century BC shows him fighting Heracles, but there's no written story about this battle. It's just something people think might have been a myth back then. 3. Calypso in the Odyssey, an epic by Homer, Calypso is a fascinating character from Greek myths. She's a sea nymph who keeps the hero Odysseus on her island Ogygia for 7 long years. Calypso falls hard for Odysseus and even offers to make him immortal if he stays and marries her. But Odysseus, despite being tempted by her beauty and the comfortable life she offers, can't stop thinking about getting back to his wife Penelope in Ithaca. Calypso lives in a big cave on Ogygia, where she spends her time weaving with golden thread and singing beautifully. But even in this paradise-like setting, Odysseus is miserable, missing his home and family a lot. He often sits on the beach, staring off in the direction of Ithaca, longing to go back. This story also shows how gods meddle in human lives. Athena, who's always had Odysseus's back, asks Zeus to tell Calypso to let Odysseus go, because his destiny isn't to stay with her. In the end, Calypso helps Odysseus leave. She's not happy about it, but she gives him what he needs to build a boat and stock it with food and supplies for his trip. 2. Cersei. Cersei is another interesting character in the Odyssey. She's a minor goddess and a witch, known for her skills with potions and herbs. She's the daughter of Helios, the sun god, and Perse, a sea nymph. When Odysseus and his crew, on their way home from the Trojan War, land on her island, Aea, Cersei uses her magic to turn most of them into pigs. But Odysseus, helped by the god Hermes and a special charm, confronts her and doesn't get turned into a pig. Instead, Cersei falls for him and changes his men back into humans. Odysseus and his crew end up staying with Cersei for a year. She starts off as their captor but turns into a helpful guide. When it's time for them to leave, she gives Odysseus important advice for his journey home. She tells him to go to the underworld to get advice from the prophet Tiresias and gives him tips on how to survive the dangerous trip. Her help is a big reason why Odysseus eventually makes it back to Ithaca. There's more to Cersei's story than just in the Odyssey. Hesiod, another ancient Greek poet, says that Cersei and Odysseus had 3 sons during that year, including Telegonus. These sons become important in other myths. In a sad twist, one of these sons, Telegonus, ends up accidentally killing Odysseus in a fight, not knowing Odysseus is his dad. 1. Lernaean Hydra. The Lernaean Hydra was a super horrible monster from Greek mythology. It's famous for being one of Hercules' challenges in his 12 labors. This beast wasn't your typical sea monster. It was more like a giant snake with lots of heads. The craziest thing about it? If you cut off one head, 2 more would grow back. It was born from Typhon and Echidna, who were like the king and queen of monsters in these stories. The Hydra lived in the swamps near Lake Lerna, in a place called Argolid, and it was a real problem for the people living there. Hercules, on his second labor, was sent by King Eurystheus to kill the Hydra. This was actually a trick by the goddess Hera, who didn't like Hercules and wanted to get rid of him. When Hercules found the Hydra, he started chopping off its heads. But he quickly realized that more heads kept growing back. That's when his nephew Iolaus came up with a clever idea. He suggested using a firebrand to burn the necks right after cutting off the heads. This stopped new heads from growing. Hercules used this trick and finally beat the Hydra. But there was one head that wouldn't die, so Hercules buried it under a big rock. He even used a special golden sword from the goddess Athena to cut it off. The Hydra's blood was super poisonous, so Hercules used it to make his arrows even more deadly for his future tasks. The story of the Hydra isn't just a cool myth. It connects to other ancient stories from places like Sumeria, Babylon, and Assyria. There's even a constellation named after it. In these older myths, creatures similar to the Hydra pop up, showing how these stories were shared and changed over time. The Hydra wasn't just a monster Hercules fought. It became a symbol in ancient cultures and influenced a lot of their stories and ideas. What if they had a showdown with Cthulhu from those spooky Lovecraft stories? Who do you think would win? Drop your guesses in the comments. And hey, hit that like and subscribe button for more.